Good afternoon, friends and family. My name is Jeffrey Moore. I'm the pastor here at St. Stephen United Methodist Church, and it is my distinct privilege and honor to welcome you this afternoon to this service in celebration of the life and legacy of Philip Henderson. We come today in grief, acknowledging our human loss. We come knowing that we can no longer touch the hands that shaped this space. We come knowing that we can no longer hear the voice that gave life to this very acoustic. We come knowing that we can no longer drink from the well of wisdom and insight that envisioned a monument such as this. We come looking to find comfort in the midst of pain, hope in the midst of sorrow. Many who enter this space describe this building as a cave or a catacomb or a tomb. If you paused at the entrance to see the pictures taken immediately after the opening of the building, all done at night with very stark lighting, you can see where they got the idea. And yet, even in his absence, Philip, along with his partners James Pratt and Hal Box, did not leave us without signs of hope as his creative mind sought inspiration to bring form to this space. If you sit here long enough, you can feel it in the thick, strong walls with no hard corners, which seem to reach out to offer the one who seeks solace here a warm, comforting embrace. You can see it above and behind me. Any architect who enters St. Stephen quickly realizes it takes inspiration from Le Corbusier's Notre Dame du Haut in Rochon, France. But whereas Le Corbusier chose to provide relief to Notre Dame du Haut's cold, hard, tomb-like shell with narrow, simple, clear-story windows, here Philip and company offer us something different, something, I dare say, more inspired and elegant. It's almost as if an invisible hand has reached down to carve out an opening in the hardened rock, creating a cleft through which the numinous seeks to touch the mundane. I don't know anything about Philip's spirituality. Those are not conversations we shared. But what I do know is that he had an uncanny, innate ability to give form to bring life to deep truths of the universe. However you name them, philosophers and theologians as far back as Plato have sought to articulate these deep, transcendental truths: unity, harmony, goodness, beauty. Philip may not have known of the psalmist's praise of the amiable dwellings of the Most High, which the choir will bring to life in music later. But he did create amiable dwellings for God's people. And he knew that all communities need amiable, livable spaces in order to thrive and flourish. And he may not have known of the psalmist's description of God's shepherding care in Psalm 23. But he knew what it was like to turn dark, deathly valleys into verdant paths for people's journeying. And he knew the importance of having places along the journey to spread a table where sojourners might foster convivium rather than animosity. Beauty, goodness, harmony, unity. Philip had the ability to bring these ideas to form. We sit in the midst of an example of that. It is a lasting legacy to his life, to his genius, to his gentle creativity. As one of the last intact public works of the Pratt-Box-Henderson era, I am proud of this congregation's work to restore and endow this building for generations to come. Work that you could not miss coming in the building. I'm also proud that it will be listed on the National Registry of Historic Places, so that this architectural jewel may take its place in the crown of North Texas and even, in fact, American architecture. One of my last visits to Philip was in the hospital after having his hip replaced. I walked in his room. He was stretched out on the bed with his head propped up, his arm resting behind it, not watching TV, as every other hospital patient I have ever visited has done. Not Philip. He was busy in his mind, pondering these deep truths, remembering and dreaming. We talked that night of opera and music and architecture and vibrant communities and beauty and goodness and harmony. Because this was the mind and the life of Philip Henderson. I have a file on the desktop of my computer entitled Questions for Philip. There were questions that I had planned to use for an oral history, both of St. Stephen and of his broader work. They are, I regret, questions that will never be answered. But as long as we remember, as long as we dream, as long as we look for the path to bring to life these deep truths, as long as we continue to ask deep questions rather than watch TV, as long as we tend to and curate this precious legacy, Philip will live on for generations to come.
Hello, I'm Peter Henderson, one of Philip's sons, and thank you all for coming. The Reverend and Will will tell you a lot about the architecture, so I just thought I would tell you a little bit about growing up with him. And I thought I'd start with Paladero Canyon out in West Texas. I don't know if you've been there. It's red rock, white rock, towers of rock sculpted by the wind and maybe oceans millions and millions of years ago. It's really beautiful, and when I was about my son Milo's age 13, we went there for spring break camping for a week. And it was just cold as the dickens out there. About the only thing Matthew and I remember was it was blowing wind every second that we were there. But Dad and Mom camp in style, and Dad would do the cooking when we were outside. So he would get up and make eggs and eggs and bacon or something for breakfast, fry up something, maybe steaks for dinner. We had lots to do because he had just packed that trunk really tight. I kind of think of him like Tom Sawyer with the white fence, tricking his friends into painting the fence along with him. To this day, I love to pack the trunk of my car. It is just so fun to kind of figure out the puzzle of how you get everything in there. So we had a lot to do out there. And I think one of the couple of things that I was going to just say today is that I thought he was an intrepid guy, and that was a good example of it. An adventurous sort, along with my mom. Those camping trips happened every spring break, a week with kids out in far-flung places. We went down the canyons and Big Bend on rafts. We climbed an 8,000-foot peak in New Mexico, and one time we went for what was supposed to be a simple little trip to Caney Creek, Arkansas, which is this tiny little creek up in Arkansas that goes back and forth on this lovely little trail. It was the spring, it was full of flowers. We all wore these heavy backpacks, and after we got in, we just dropped them and decided we'd take day trips, which we did for a couple of days. And then it rained the night before we were supposed to go back, and it kept raining, it kept on raining. It turns out it had rained more than it had in 100 years. And the little creek had become a roaring river. So we put on our packs, so we started going across this now roaring river, and some of you may know the Kuttners and the Buziotises, so they were along with us, and basically the adult men would do a daisy chain across and hand off the kids and everything, until finally Jean Buziotis was out going out into the river, and she fell down. And the current started to take her. And then John Kuttner ran in and grabbed her. And the current started to take them down. So then Bill Buziotis ran in and grabbed John Kuttner and held for a second or two and then started going down. And then Dad ran in and grabbed, who was the last one? Bill, and they all pulled back out. We put up some tents, and that night it kept raining, and Dad, I guess we'd put the tent right in the path of the water, so he somehow managed to move the tent without us getting wet in the middle of the night. And the next morning, he managed to start a fire out of the wood that was on the ground. And my mom wrote a long letter about it to his parents. And the other kind of intrepid member of the family, Aunt Joanne there, apparently was ready to send in the National Guard, but my mom said that she was the only one who was like, don't worry, they are going to make it out of here. Anyway, I thought that was pretty intrepid, and despite all of that craziness, what I really remember most was just being in the tent in the middle of the night. It was a 3-person tent. There were 4 of us, and we were making up haikus. It was so cozy, and I just thought that was a good sign of a couple of parents who, in the middle of that craziness, could keep their kids just with that memory of being cozy. So the other thing I wanted to say about him was that I will remember forever is he just liked the doing of things. I think you'll hear a lot about his accomplishments today. Well, we're in one of them. But he really liked the process, too. When we were kids, he would take his tracing paper to the dining table and just kind of like be going, and it was inspiring to watch because, like the trunk of that needed to be packed, it was more kind of a puzzle to be worked out, kind of a joy to do than a task. I always thought he apparently wanted to be an architect since he was 12 or 13, and I thought he was a lucky guy to know what he wanted to do and to so passionately stick with it forever. One of the examples of the doing and the intrepidness that I think I wanted to tell you about was this bath complex, one of his last designs. Our family has a little place up in Canada that recently got hot water after 100 years, and he built these 2 5-foot by 5-foot structures that are kitty-corner to each other, placed in the trees just so, and he built them himself starting when he was about 80. He would get up in the morning, we'd have a big breakfast, we'd talk a lot, and then he'd go out to the table saw, make a few cuts, put up a couple pieces of wood, maybe shout for some help moving some rocks, stop for coffee, have a good talk about Hamilton with Milo, my son. Maybe he'd also talk about Milo and how much he liked him. We'd talk about what he'd been reading. If you've talked to him, you'd get the picture. And then he'd go back and do some more and then take a break for the rest of the day. So it took him a decade. He was about 90 when he finished that. This project included a compost toilet of his own design, and which I have the pleasure of still servicing. And I just thought, you know, it's pretty good when you're in your 80s and still sticking with it and enjoying it so much. So the last thing that I wanted to just tell you about was a bit about how long this intrepid nature lasted, which was till the end. And we'll go back to Paladero Canyon because Ken Easterwood, who may be somewhere in the audience and is a young friend of Dad's in his 70s, I understand, kind of a recent acquaintance of 5 years. So they decided to go out to West Texas a couple of months before Dad died. And the way Dad tells it, he was clever enough to bring along his walker, even just because if you're going to go out in the middle of nowhere, you should. But I think they drove out to Lubbock, stopping to eat along the way. They took a nap at the hotel. They were staying in a hotel, so he learned something. And then, as the sun was setting, they drove 100 miles up to Cap Rock, a park near Paladero. And they were expecting to hear coyotes, who did not sing that night, but they also wanted to see the stars. And you can imagine in West Texas at night, you can see the stars pretty well. And one of them brought along a flask of bourbon, and apparently they just sat there drinking, talking. Ken was saying it was one of the best conversations of his life, and looking out at the stars. So I thought I'd just leave you with that memory that Ken shared with me. I will be thinking about him just sitting out, looking up at the stars. So, Willis, you are next. Thank you.
I'm Willis Winters. Matthew and Peter, thank you for giving me the privilege to be here today and speak. Philip Henderson was a remarkable man, if you didn't already know that. He had a powerful intellect and a passion for design and urban planning that had a profound impact on Dallas until the very last moment of his remarkable life and career. I first met Philip in the early 1980s through our involvement in the American Institute of Architects, but I didn't really connect with him until the late 1990s when Philip and others co-founded the Friends of the Katy Trail to advocate for public and private funding for the design and construction of a 3.5-mile long bike and pedestrian trail through central Dallas. We became closer colleagues and friends around 2012 when Philip approached me with an idea to create a loop trail around Dallas. In 2018, I had the further extraordinary opportunity to work with Philip on 3 different projects almost simultaneously. The first was a symposium sponsored by an organization named DocoMoMo, the Documentation and Conservation of the Modern Movement, the North Texas chapter of DocoMoMo, entitled Shaping Dallas Architecture, the Legacy of Pratt, Box, and Henderson. The second was working closely with Philip to prepare his submission to the Texas Society of Architects for their Lifetime Achievement Award. And the third was working with Philip and 2 other people, both who are here today, to create an exhibition at the Architecture and Design Exchange of Dallas AIA on the architecture of Charles Stevens Dilbeck, which Philip designed that exhibit. And it was during this period that I had the good fortune to spend much time with Philip, to interview him in connection with 2 of these projects that we were working on together, and in the process to build a very strong friendship and relationship. Philip graduated from Cornell University in 1953 and worked briefly for one of America's greatest architects, Eero Saarinen, the designer of the St. Louis Gateway Arch and the Dulles Airport Terminal in Washington. Saarinen's father, Eliel, had previously prepared a campus master plan, and Eero himself designed a dormitory building for Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where Philip's father was the college president. Philip served in the Army for 2 years, then rejoined Saarinen's office between 1956 and 1960. During this period, he worked on the Milwaukee War Memorial on the waterfront there and the John Deere World Headquarters in Illinois. Other architects in Saarinen's office included Kevin Roche, Caesar Pelli, Warren Plattner, and Robert Venturi. Philip's desk was adjacent to an open staircase in the Saarinen office, and he told me that from his vantage point, he witnessed the birth of the idea for the design of the TWA terminal at LaGuardia Airport. As Kevin Roche was coming down the stairs, simultaneously peeling an orange, he stopped and squeezed the orange peel in such a way that it formed the now famous roof segments of the terminal building. And Philip witnessed that moment of creation of one of the great buildings in modern architecture. Many, many other stories as well. And if you can, the architects in the room, if you can imagine working in the same office as Eero Saarinen, Kevin Roche, Robert Venturi, and Caesar Pelli, that's mind-blowing. After his arrival in Dallas in 1960, Philip focused on building a relationship and then establishing a new firm with his partners James Pratt and Hal Box. Pratt provided Philip with an entree to an extensive network of friends and clients in the city, a matrix of social and professional associations that led to a life of civic involvement and community service. He soon learned that as a volunteer board member of organizations, he had a unique opportunity and perhaps even a moral duty as a professional planner to guide the board's goals to a higher vision, one that would make his community a better place to live. Philip's innate ability to visualize an ideal and bring people together, particularly non-architects, to achieve it is an uncommon gift that has served Dallas since the mid-1960s. During the 60s and 70s, Pratt Box and Henderson produced one of the most widely respected and celebrated oeuvres of any architecture and planning firm in Dallas and Texas. Their work was diverse, not only in scale and program and complexity, but also in the wide range of their clients and in the conception of their design response for each individual project. And this remarkable church is an example of that. In 2018, a group of Dallas and Fort Worth architects that I mentioned earlier, the North Texas chapter of Docomomo, recognized the profound design legacy of Pratt Box and Henderson with a major symposium dedicated to their work. And I wish I could show you pictures of some of their work that I'm going to name here, but given the profile of the folks in this room, many of whom have been in Dallas a long time, you're going to know these projects as I list them. And I'm beginning here with St. Stephen's, which was completed in 1962. The Great Hall of the Apparel Mart, 1964. The Swiss Sky Ride at Fair Park for the State Fair of Texas. The Quadrangle. The Children's Development Center, not many of you may know that one, completed in 1970, but a remarkable building. The Dallas Garden Center Solarium at Fair Park, 1971. Olla Podrida, 1974. Brookhaven College, 1978. And Pratt Box and Henderson, or PBH as we also call them, were associate architects to Edward Larrabee Barnes for the Dallas Museum of Art, which opened in 1984. Urban design projects were also an important part of PBH's work. They prepared and Philip worked on the Fair Park Master Plan, which for the State Fair of Texas in 1966, and he prepared the firm's entry for the Arts District Master Plan for the Dallas Arts District in 1982. But Philip did much more than just design. He was also vitally interested in exhibitions. He worked with Carolyn Brown, who is here today, on an exhibition of her architectural photography of Egypt, an exhibit called The Shape of Light. And he worked with Carolyn and others and myself on the exhibition on the architecture of Charles Stevens Dilbeck in 2019. Pratt Box and Henderson was one of only very few firms to be recognized with the highest design awards by the American Institute of Architects. It's called the 25-Year Award, given to a building that is 25 years of age or older, generally considered to be the highest recognition to an architectural project. First, this building received the 25-Year Award in 2001, and Brookhaven College received it from AIA in 2016. And then I've mentioned the symposium. So those are just some of the many design accolades and recognitions that Pratt Box and Henderson received. And their work is still held in high regard, obviously with the symposium, but unfortunately, much of it has been demolished. We're very fortunate that this congregation and this pastor love and cherish this particular building and are doing everything they can to save it. Philip's volunteer work for the Visiting Nurse Association of Texas, which was an organization that provided health care and other services in the home to senior citizens, spanned his lifetime. He joined VNA's board in 1966, the same year that Medicare was created by the federal government. And under Philip's leadership, VNA was integrally involved in developing programs for adult daycare, respite care, long-term care, hospice services, and geriatric primary care clinics that would ultimately constitute the Medicare home care program in the entire state of Texas. Several years later, Philip, and by this time he's probably in his late 30s, joined the board of the Community Council of Greater Dallas and was soon appointed chair of the Dallas Area Agency on Aging. Philip and the staff there drafted a plan to provide a network of multipurpose senior centers and basic services funded through state and federal programs. Today, there are over 50 senior centers in Dallas County, serving almost 250,000 residents. In 1982, Philip had the opportunity to apply his planning skills to the neighborhood where he and his wife Jerry lived and where he worked since his arrival in Dallas 2 decades earlier. The urgent need to develop a sensible plan for Oak Lawn was addressed with the formulation of the Oak Lawn Forum, an organization comprising a balanced membership of both residents and commercial developers. Philip served as the architect planner on a steering committee that created an ad hoc coalition of competing interests, residential and commercial, that worked together to formulate the Oak Lawn Plan, which was adopted by the City of Dallas in 1985. And that plan has guided the redevelopment of Oak Lawn over the past 38 years, that has guided that into a vibrant neighborhood that it is today. The significance of Philip's leadership and insight, that community engagement and planning creates stability because it gives citizens a proprietary stake in the future, is still evident today in the plan's success. Billions of dollars in new development, a stable and sustainable economic base, and 3 separate tax increment finance districts that provide funding for infrastructure and aesthetics. The third important component of Philip's remarkable triumvirate of community services to Dallas, so we've heard of human services advocacy, planning advocacy, and now urban design advocacy. And this advocacy is evident in the extraordinary impact he has had over the past 15 years and the influence that he continues to exert in the development of one of the great urban trail systems in the United States. As I touched on earlier, in 1997, Philip collaborated with others to form a Friends organization in support of the Katy Trail, a 3.5-mile long bike and pedestrian trail. This project created a 125-acre linear park in the very heart of Dallas that now logs over 1 million users a year. And my wife and I just had lunch, came here from a restaurant adjacent to the Katy Trail on Knox Street. It just is amazing to continue to witness firsthand the impact of that trail project and of Philip's leadership. Its economic impact, that of the Katy Trail, is well over $1 billion. Philip was instrumental in creating this vital public-private partnership with the City of Dallas, creating a model for subsequent partnerships, including Clyde Warren Park and others, that have transformed Dallas into a national urban destination. As the long-term president of the Friends, Philip utilized his architectural vision and urban planning experience to elevate the Katy Trail from a simple rails to trails project into a great urban park that has had a profound impact on how Dallas views itself as a truly cosmopolitan city. After the Katy Trail Master Plan was largely implemented over a period of 2 decades, Philip began to envision an even greater urban trail project in Dallas, a premier transportation network surrounding the core of Dallas that would be linked together by a 50-mile dedicated hike and bike loop. By linking existing trails to one another, neighborhoods would be connected for the first time, and a safe and alternative transportation mode would be provided to Dallas residents. In 2015, Philip joined with a small group of influential trail enthusiasts to create the Circuit Trail Conservancy. And that name comes from the world-changing invention of the integrated circuit, which occurred at Texas Instruments in 1958. The Conservancy put together a private funding proposal and successfully lobbied the city for bond funds that resulted in a $43 million public-private partnership dedicated to creating vital connections and an expansion of the city's existing trail network. Master planning under Philip's leadership and private fundraising continues to this day as various segments of the Loop Trail are currently being constructed. Throughout his career, Philip consistently has been acclaimed for service to both his community and to his profession. These recognitions include the highest awards for community service from the Dallas Historical Society and the Texas Society of Architects, as well as the two highest awards given by AIA Dallas. And I've got a separate 4-page list of his awards that is mind-blowing. Here's a few highlights. He was elevated to the College of Fellows in the American Institute of Architects in 1996. He received the President's Medal from AIA Dallas in 2004. He was recognized in 2006 with the State Award for Community Service from the Texas Society of Architects, called the Pfluger Award. In 2011, AIA recognized him with their Lifetime Achievement Award. Dallas Historical Society in 2016 recognized him with an award for excellence in community service. And in most recently, 2018, Philip received the Medal for Lifetime Achievement from the Texas Society of Architects. Philip was a mentor and role model to many Dallas architects, several of whom are in this room today, and to other friends organizations. His long and distinguished involvement with architecture and planning in Dallas was meticulously intertwined with his civic engagement. He believed that good design binds together a community, shapes its culture, and makes the lives of its citizens better in the process. Philip was both humble and sophisticated in his approach to his projects and activities. His strategic and relentless tenacity over the past half-century has toppled attitudes and barriers, and fortunately for his city, our city, has turned his vision for a better Dallas into reality.
Thank you, Willis. That was a lovely recitation of Dad's long life and career. For me, today is so much about seeing all of the overlapping communities here today. All the Smith cousins from my mother's side of the family, all the Pratt's cousins, descendants of my Aunt Joanne. Of course, all the architects, people from the DMA, the arts community, the design community, the trails. I too, Reverend Moore, am not exactly sure of where my dad's spirituality landed, but I will tell you this. We once visited Yellow Springs, Ohio, where he grew up, and he was eager to go to church that day. It was a Palm Sunday, and it was so evident how much joy he really took from the community there and all the people he saw and talked to. Dad was a social animal. I think we all know that. And in so many nights in the last couple of years were spent at dinner parties at Nancy Schutz's house, spending time with Nancy around Dallas and taking trips together, which were all very much cherished by him. So in that spirit of community and Dad's real hunger for community and building community, I'd like to invite everyone to just take a few minutes, turn to someone next to you, and share a story about Dad. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's, I have to say that seeing this would have pleased Dad immensely. And I hope you all will continue the stories at the reception afterwards. But now I would like to invite up my cousins.
Good afternoon. I'm Sabrina Pratt, and we're the three of us are working together to do a reading, which we did not rehearse. I'm sorry.
We did, a little bit. I'm Alexandra Pratt, the middle one. And I'm the baby. Ilya Pratt, sorry, the baby. So we learned, actually with Uncle Philip's passing, that a favorite poet of his was Billy Collins. And so we offer the poem, The Teacher. There is that part of us that believes we will never die. Otherwise, how could we watch so much television? And there is the part that believes when we die, all life will come to an end. This is the part that storms within us, dragging its robes across the marble floor.
But what I like to believe is that the minute I die, the world will change into a map of the world, which I will roll up into a tube and carry with me wherever I am going.
It could be an antique map with pictures of sea serpents in the corners, or a huge Mercator projection. But when I finally get where I'm going, and I have a feeling it will take days,
I will spread out the map on something flat, and there I will study the patterns of shorelines and boundaries, maybe reminisce about a country I once visited, or a strait where a naval battle once took place.
I also like to believe that there will be other beings there who will gather around this picture of Earth so I can explain to them what it was like.
how the cold mountains rose above valleys, how this was called geography, how the people from this pale blue area crossed into the light green area to the south and killed whoever they found there, and how this was known as history.
And as they listen, mild-eyed and silent, others will arrive to join the circle, like ripples moving toward the center instead of away.
Thank you, Uncle Philip. You were a teacher to us, and we appreciate your enduring love and support.
Now, where I come from, we say amen. I don't know if that's appropriate here, but our time here has already come to an end. Though I was going to say it is time for us not to end our gathering, but to transform ourselves from a gathering into a community. Matthew, our community organizer, has already done that. So I hope, as he entreated you, that over the next hour or so, you will linger in this space that Philip gave us to make community, to share stories, to ask questions, to ponder, to remember, and dream. So, I invite you now, I implore you, as you move on in life, as you remember Philip, to walk in beauty as Philip did, to practice goodness as Philip did, to live in harmony as Philip did, and always to seek community. Amen. Oh.